What's up, Path of Exile players? So let's go over the best runes and the best soul cores, essentially kind of answering the question, what is the best thing to socket in your pieces of gear? What's kind of like the go-to? And the reason why it's very important that you decide this before making that commitment is because whatever soul core or whatever rune that you put in, it is a permanent decision. You cannot delete it, you can't remove it, you can't unsocket it. It is a permanent decision. So let's go ahead and go over every single piece of gear and go over kind of what is the go-to for, I want to say 99% of builds. And the reason why I say that is there's always unique builds in Path of Exile that will do some crazy thing that you need like maximum of a resistance, or you need a very specific stat that is kind of more obscure, but this is going to be for like the general build here. So for starters, let's go over one of the most important things, and a thing that I get asked all the time, which is the weapon slot. So if I'm playing Lightning Arrow, Ice Shot, or anything that has to do with a lot of different elements, I will still go for physical. You can see this also on the Path of Exile website, which is going to be the rune that gives you increased physical damage. Now, if I'm playing a lightning build, why don't I just put the lightning rune? Well, how it works is the increased physical damage is just going to give us a higher number here, because a lot of skills where it's lightning arrow converting 40% or ice shot converting 70%, that conversion will be more valuable than the small amount that you would get from the other runes. Now, each one of these runes has a name, but like to make it easier, I'm just going to say like this one, I'm calling it like the fire rune, just so it kind of makes sense. So the added fire damage, it really isn't going to outclass the 20% on physical, because that 20% on physical is simply just going to give us a bigger number. So that's why you see in weapons, even on a lot of melee builds, they still go for physical. Obviously, if you're a physical build, you want physical anyways. But the reason why all of the best like bows, for the most part, they're all running the increased physical, it just gives you a higher number. So that's in the weapon slot most of the time, and just to go over like the names of the runes, kind of like where you would put them in here. So in the weapon, most of the time, again, it's going to be increased physical damage. Now, if you're early on in the earlier acts, you can throw in like the plus damage one. It's not that big of a deal. These runes are super common. They're not like super expensive. So feel free to experiment on these earlier on, and don't feel like you have to save these for the end game. Use them while you're leveling. It's fine. Later on, you're going to get so many of these, you just don't have room for them. So for starters, the other good thing to actually utilize all of these runes for is actually getting resistance. With the exception of chaos resistance, you're going to need a soul core, and I'll go over like the good soul core for that. So as far as it goes, I'm just going to use this little thing over here, and if you guys ever need to get these, you can always talk to Alva once you have her unlocked. You could just go to currency exchange, and if you're like, I really need to get a very specific like rune, like maybe like I really want that physical one, right? Since we're talking about like the weapon over here. In the weapon department, we're going to go to the increased physical, and then I could say I want iron rune. Let's say I have exalted orbs. It's kind of like the golden standard currency. So 2 of these will get me basically 5 of the runes. Again, the runes aren't really expensive, so don't worry about kind of just using them earlier on. Now, basically in like Act 1, the early stages, feel free to use the ones that give you damage, because when your weapon is like 5 to 10 damage, you know, getting 20% of that versus 7 to 11 fire damage, that one would be better. But this is like super early game to the point where it's not really worth mentioning, but I figure I go ahead and give you guys all the knowledge so you guys kind of understand. It's just because it's based off of the weapon's like damage itself, and earlier on the weapon damage is a lot lower. So as far as it goes, let's go back to the runes over here, and I'm going to go over every single socket in terms of which one is the best. Now, in a lot of cases on your armor, so the runes do different things depending on where they are socketed in. So in your weapon, again, we already went over physical, and then the rest of them are pretty much just going for resistances, but there are niche ones that I think are very important to mention. So it depends on what you need. Do you need resistance in lightning? Do you need fire res? Do you need cold res? Whatever the case may be. And that can apply to your armor, but armor actually has a little bit of a thing that is different. And in the armor, you can actually get increased evasion rating, armor. That is a pretty big deal as well. If you run certain things that could give you like double your body armor and stuff like that, that is actually going to be better. Kind of depends on your build. But to go over all the runes and where they would actually see some play is any of the ones where it says like resistance, those are all pretty good. Those are like the best in slot, and it doesn't mean you have to always throw those in. Once your resistances, like you can see over here on my resistances, I have all my resistances capped, so I don't need any more. So at this point, we can maybe use one that gives us HP or more expensive cores. So cores are basically kind of the same thing. They're just, instead of being a rune, it's a core. You socket them in gear as well. We'll go over that in a second, but I want to go over all the runes. So again, if you need resistance, that's good. Iron rune can still be good in your armor, So again, that's what I was saying, where like if you play the Rangers, like you can get double your evasion in your chest piece. This is valuable in the armor department, but remember, you cannot remove them, so once you put it in, that's it. And then as far as this goes, I would say Vision Rune, pretty much a skip in most cases. Again, there's some sort of niche builds sometimes, but Glacial, it's kind of like the fire one over here, where it's fire res, this is cold res. And then this one, if you want to get some extra maximum life, I mean, objectively, it's just better than putting in nothing. And then we have some stun build up and stun threshold. Again, for more niche builds, that's totally fine to go ahead and play that as well. Now, this one over here, you can get some physical leeched as mana. You can get that also in your gloves, so I wouldn't waste a rune. To lose out on 20% fizz is definitely not worth it. Mana per enemy killed, you can get that on the weapon already. Again, losing out on 20% of the damage is usually not worth it. So, as far as the runes go, it's pretty much just utilized for, again, this would be in your your body armor and your weapon, and then the rest is just kind of resistances as far as the runes go. We also have the soul cores. So the soul cores are basically the same thing. Now, some of these are actually worth some decent amount of currency, and I want to go over the ones that are kind of worth money before going over them. So let's also go ahead and kind of go over the ones that are a little bit more valuable. So there's one that does give you chaos resistance, but there are some that are actually quite expensive. You can see there's ones that are several divines over here, and this one gives you increased rarity of items found. You can see this one starts off at 3 divines, so this one is definitely valuable. It's one of the best ones that you can get as a drop, but as far as it being good in your build, well, would I throw this in without being res cap? Probably not. But this is more like an end game premium stat, but it is still one of the best socketables if you're interested in, maybe getting a lot of increased rarity here. Another one that has a lot of value is this Soul Core of Xalotl, which gives us in armor increased mana, but then on the martial weapon, we get to recover % of mana on kill. This is similar to the Siphon that a lot of people are getting anointed on their passive tree. This is actually pretty big, because as you get further and further in the game, it will cost more and more mana. Once you get your 5-6 link setup, it's going to cost more mana, so this is really helpful for those builds towards the end game. But there are still a couple other good soul cores that I do want to go over, but I want to go over the ones that are most valuable real quick. So some of them, they do certain things where you get some, again, weapon pen over here. You can get increased ailment threshold. There's increased life over here, but you can run a thing that requires you to run spirit, basically a buff and aura, and you can get cannibalism that gives you 4% on kill, but that's an okay thing. It's just a lot of people want specifically mana. There's also maximum fire, lightning, and cold resistance if you are playing a build that can maybe do damage conversion. There's also conversion on the soul cores to convert 20% of the requirements to dex, int, whatever. So if you're really trying to equip an item that you really shouldn't be equipping because you don't have the requirements, instead of trying to squeeze out 100 or 200 strength or dex int, you could use one of these, but I would say it's a little bit mediocre for the most part. Again, you go into the very, very niche sort of thing in the builds, but I'm going to mouse over some of them. Again, you can get max fire or whatever, but I already went over this one. This one is money. And then the other one that's good, it's, I believe at the moment, it's okay, okay, let's say we want one. I think it's 5. Okay, so yeah, the soul core here that gives you chaos resistance. This one is pretty good as well. And then we also have some chance to cause bleed. But again, this one actually I think is okay, because if you look at the amount of resistance it gives us, we get let's say 12 to fire res, whereas this one is 5 to all elemental resistances. So numerically, yeah, you get a little bit more, but it's not really that big of a deal. But if you're looking for increased chance of shock, I guess there's here. Again, most of the time with weapons, you're gonna want the physical damage. It's too big to kind of give up. And then this one over here, if you're running a build, if you want to maybe run an aura bot or something like that, maybe you can try to run a lot of extra things that would give you spirit, and I guess this one would maybe have some sort of use, but I really wish that these runes could upgrade in tier. That'd be kind of a nice thing, because these definitely fall off towards the end game for the flat damage. That's why, again, everyone goes for the % physical damage, because, well, if your weapon starts scaling the numbers, then it becomes way more valuable. So hopefully this video was informative and you guys learned something new about what's the best things to socket in. But just remember, guys, once you put that thing in, it is there permanently. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up the video in terms of what to actually think about to socket in your pieces of gear. But yeah, if you need chaos res, this one is definitely going to be a nicer touch. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't give you 12. They're kind of stingy with the amount of chaos res that they give you in the endgame, but make sure you guys cap your resistances, and that's kind of what these are utilized for, and then getting just damage on your weapon. Again, percent physical. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed it, drop a like, sub if you're new here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care, and I'm out. Peace.